right, so yeah, my name is Albert Swanson. I work with Access with the suicide prevention team. And so if you didn't know, it is September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so today's presentation is just going to provide you some information, raise some awareness. I will talk a little bit about contractor specific. And we do recognize the information is difficult and can be triggering for a lot of individuals who have known someone who has died by suicide. So if you do need to take a break and step away, please feel free to do that. And that'll be totally okay. We can give you resources afterwards as well. And the presentation is only going to last about 10 minutes. So this is not an in-depth dive, just a really shallow kind of, over the top. And so definitely if you're interested or you're seeing this be a need on your teams, I would recommend we do at Access have additional more in-depth trainings that we can provide, and I will give that information in the end. All right, so suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in Arizona. Governor Ducey did proclaim September as Suicide Prevention Month in Arizona. Among those that are 10 to 34 in Arizona, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death. So it is a pretty great problem in the state. The Arizona, on the scale, I think we are 13th in the nation. So we're not where we would like to be. Obviously 0 is the goal, but still kind of high as far as national trends. On average, a suicide occurs approximately every 7 hours in Arizona. And as I said, we do rank 13th in the nation for deaths by suicide. Just over 1,400 Arizonans died by suicide in 2019. And I don't have it on there, but I'll just kind of generally let you know that the data tells us that middle-aged white men typically are the highest category of individuals affected. Obviously, population comes into play there, but when we look at rates per 100,000, we do see some communities with higher rates than others, such as veterans. Obviously, you've probably seen a lot of awareness around that. Veterans do have higher rates as well. Sometimes in our tribal communities, we see higher rates. And so those are also things that at Access we do take into consideration and look at those communities. So stigma is a problem in this line of work and with mental health and behavioral health in general. We're trying to combat the stereotypes, and some of the language around suicide that's not super helpful and has been unfortunately stigmatizing to individuals. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in this presentation and different ways that we can talk about that and learn from some of these terms that we've used. We do have additional trainings, mental health first aid and safe talk, as well as assist are 2 really good trainings that will give you a deeper dive that would help you learn how to actually talk to somebody who's contemplating suicide and, potentially get them to resources, get them help, and kind of get them to a better place. So what does the data tell us? The highest affected groups are males. Suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in Arizona, 2nd for ages 10 to 34. We have nationally seen an increase, unfortunately, in suicide among youth and teens. We know that potentially things like cyberbullying and social media and whatnot does come into that and does play a factor. There's been numerous now documentaries and Netflix series on those kinds of topic lines. But this is a topic that all ages are affected. Suicides have increased for those under the age of 15, which require additional research. As I mentioned, cyberbullying is a factor. A lot of schools have anti-bullying campaigns now. So as far as contractors go, and this information is available on the CDC's website, the construction industry has one of the highest suicide rates compared to other industries. In 2016, the suicide rate for men in the construction occupations was 49.4 per 100,000. And so with suicide, that's typically how we measure is per 100,000. It basically takes population size out of it, so it doesn't really matter the population size of the area. But 49.4 is pretty high. I believe that's even higher than our veterans numbers. So that is almost twice the total suicide rate for the civilian workforce in 32 states. As you can see, that is 27.4 per 100,000. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done into that, and the CDC doesn't provide a lot of answers at this point, or what, kind of best guesses at this point. But work can define a person's identity and psychological risk factors. Workplace stress is always a big factor. Depression in the workplace, job strain, long hours, which it wouldn't be unknown to those in construction, those contractors. And so creating and maintaining a healthy work organization is a strategy, obviously, where you can, increasing worker job control and ensuring they have, potentially not so high of a work demands as far as, the work week going over 40 hours, things like that. Obviously, in some fields, that's going to be a lot harder than in other fields. But maintaining work hours of 40 hours or less in the construction industry can be challenging due to financial incentives and working overtime, labor shortages in certain skill trades. But there is a lot more research that's going to be undertaken into this to try to find out, what might be some other potential risk factors. But we do know job stress, things like that. That's similar to what we see in our military population. The workplace stress dynamics plays a big role. So if you want to do any more research into that, I put a couple links there. CDC has a blog about it and some of the work that they're doing to look into that. There is also a link there with the research and training, construction research and training organization. And so you can look at that as well. And they do have resources information there. And so what to look for if you have somebody on your team or someone in your close environment, potentially a loss of a loved one. If they're isolating from the team, they seem to be withdrawn. Maybe they're not taking place in after work functions anymore as they used to. Some drastic sleep changes. Maybe they're sleeping too much now or sleeping not at all. Substance use is a big one. Alcohol, drugs, using those kinds of things to cope with maybe some kind of pain going on. Giving away their possessions is always a scary sign. Kind of preparing people, possible planning for the end if they're not going to be here. And so what you can do if you suspect, that some individual might be having suicidal ideations, finding a private place to speak with them, to just kind of check in with them and see how they're doing. Sometimes when individuals are struggling on the work site or struggling in the workplace, a supervisor's first idea might, in some cases, be to reprimand potentially, but it would really encourage coming alongside them and trying to ascertain the reason maybe for what the struggle is and what's going on in their home life, things like that, before kind of going immediately to the reprimand step. Asking them the questions directly. If you have concerns with somebody that they might be considering suicide, it's really just better to ask them straight out, just be very direct about it. There's a misconception that you might put the idea in their head, and that's not the case. They're not going to die by suicide because you asked them about it. So just asking them very directly, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you considering suicide? Is a good way to see, kind of see where they're at. Actively listening, so you should be listening to them, not sitting there just waiting for your turn to talk. I'm sure we've all had that experience where you're talking and the person you're with is just kind of waiting for you to end so they can jump in. Letting them know you care. Avoid giving advice. This isn't kind of a father lecture time. This is kind of more just a listening and then connecting them to the appropriate resource time. You don't have to be the end all. You're not their counselor in this situation. You're just going to listen to them and just get them to some help. And so, does this person have a plan? These are some of the kind of questions that we want to have an understanding of. If they say, yes, I am considering suicide, obviously call for help, get them to help immediately. Don't leave them alone. We really need to prioritize this and, get them care immediately. If they say no, that they are not considering suicide, heavily recommended that you still encourage them to speak to a professional, speak to a loved one, a family friend, a friend, someone along those lines to get further, after care than you can provide. And maybe even ask if you can contact a family member or a friend with them that they're comfortable discussing this with. Make a plan for the person to be with other individuals for some time, maybe some observation. Potentially, if you think it's concerning enough, asking if they have a gun in the home, any unnecessary medication, things like that, we might want to encourage them to lock up for a time being or remove from the environment if it's going to be a potential thought later on. And how can you help? You can get trained. I'm going to give some information about additional trainings that we have. Always be prepared to listen, be open, to the person is saying to you, stay engaged in the conversation, know your resources. I'm going to give a couple phone numbers in just a second that you could jot down. Crisis, emergency rooms, first responders, just to be able to provide that information to them. Maybe have that information available on the work site, it's posted somewhere in a community board kind of thing where you might have other information for them. So training and resources, if you go to the Access website, you can even just Google Access and Suicide Prevention. We do have our list of other trainings. You can also fill out a form on there to request additional trainings. The kind of industry common trainings would be Safe Talk, Assist. Safe Talk is going to give you more introduction, but deeper than what we're doing right now. You will actually learn how to talk to an individual and ask them these questions directly. Assist kind of goes from there and is more intensive, a 2-day training where then you learn how to get them to a professional. You ask them about their plans, what kind of plans that they've come up with. You learn how to provide them resources, how to recognize additional warning signs that they might have a plan in place. And then mental health first aid is a overview training of just a range of mental health problems, warning signs, substance use issues, mental illness, how you can get individuals to help and support. So these are some crisis hotline options depending on where your job site is or where you're at in various counties, kind of broken up by our different regional health providers. And this contact information, this resource information is also available on our website if you want to go to Access Suicide Prevention. And this is a newer call 211 resource that we've made available thanks to newer funding that's come in due to COVID-related stress and whatnot. And so this would also be a good one if somebody's showing some stress, potentially COVID-related maybe, and you want to have them reach out to this crisis counseling program for some care. They can do that as well. And with that, that's all I have. I hope that you've got some kind of an increased awareness from this presentation, maybe something to just be a little bit more considering when you're on the job site and you're seeing individuals who maybe seem to be struggling with some things at home, to kind of be an awareness of this, especially in our schools. We do a lot of training with teachers, and because they spend a lot of time with our students and whatnot. And so recognizing that somebody who's struggling, it might not just be that they're depressed that day or they're just having a bad day, but having this in the back of your head as a consideration to keep an eye on potentially. So